that a bigger thing right now.
Imagine that. Huh? Imagine that. Yeah, you know, work. Yeah.
We agree.
You're crazy. We're ready whenever you go. During the storm,
Judge, we're ready whenever you are.
All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's meeting of the Transportation Policy Committee. I'm David Vogel, Chairman of the committee. I'd like to welcome all of you here for a meeting. This is May 26th, 2022. And now I'll ask Andy to please call the roll.
Okay, first we'll go to Bullitt County. Hello, Keith.
I'm here.
Keith Griffith's in the room, so those online probably can't see the other side of the room. Keith's here, as usual. Thank you for joining us, Keith.
And I see Felicia up there as well.
Okay, thank you, Felicia. How about City of Charlestown? City of J-Town?
Matt Meunier.
Matt? About Jeffersonville? Albany? Shively? St. Matthews?
Thanks, sir.
Thanks for joining us, Bernie. Clark County?
Ryan Dixon's here.
Brian? Floyd County?
Nick Creevy's here.
How about, NDOT? See you, Tony. I can't hear you, Tony, but I see you, Tony.
Thanks.
Jefferson League of Cities.
Sure, Barbara Chapman.
Thanks for joining us, Mayor. KYTC, who do we have from the cabinet today?
Matt Bullock, District 5.
Tracy Lovell, District 5.
Joining us?
Tom Hall, District 5.
Tom? How about from Louisville Metro? Airport Authority? Oldham County?
Here.
Judge? Anybody else? How about Clarksville? Hi, Claire. Thanks for joining us. So, Claire's the new, Claire added officially as a what we call it, alternate attendee in the cabinet, so thanks for joining us. Thank you. Tark?
Here.
Carrie? All right. How about our advisory members? I see, Ms. Akkad is in the room.
Hey. Hello, everyone.
Anybody else from Federal Highway? Let's see, KYTC District 5, we've already got those folks. Who else is here? Mike King's here from Louisville Metro, so let the record show that Mike's here as well. So, thank you all for joining us today. Judge, you want to make an announcement about the cameras?
Yes, we're gonna ask everybody who is here, who's a voting member, who runs, please turn your camera on and leave it on throughout the meeting. Appreciate that.
We're also, might add that to Judge, we're gonna try to do a better job. If we have a presentation up on the screen, we'll get the presentation off the screen so that the attendees that are out in the cyberspace, they can see their counterparts, motions, votes, comments, et cetera. So we'll do a better job on our end as well.
I Matt, I just received an email here, and we've got our message. We've got 2 accidents on 71 right now, one southbound at the 12-mile marker and one northbound at the 16-mile marker. And it was raining pretty heavily when I came in, so I took surface streets all the way here just to avoid that type of circumstance. All right, happy to have everyone. Let's ask Greg now to go to item number 2 here and 3 and see, well, do we have anybody, first of all, who's come here to make any public comment? We don't need anything. So I think all the faces here are familiar. Anybody online to make a public comment? Pardon? Meeting minutes? Oh, that skipped the minutes? Yes. All right, let's see. We've got our April 2022 minutes here. Is there a motion to accept them?
Second.
Were there any corrections or anything that needed changing? All right, hearing nothing, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand.
Aye.
Now, maybe Greg can go ahead and, talk about the, public, involvement.
We did get two, emails prior to the meeting for public comments. The first one, and I'll read these to you, and then I will actually, send them on to TPC following the meeting. Because there's a map involved, and, this is, one of the comments is actually pretty lengthy. First one says, I am writing this email to encourage funding two-way street conversions in majority black neighborhoods in the city of Louisville. I am a Smoketown resident, the oldest black neighborhood in the state of Kentucky, and a neighborhood that has the highest amount of one-way state highways in the entire city. We have tried to get records from the state transportation cabinet as to why these 6 one-ways were put in place in the 30s, but according to them, no digital records exist as the reasoning behind it. However, Metro government documents from the 1930s, city planners building the suburban neighborhoods of the Highlands mention the word, quote, reducing Negro infiltration, end quote, into the suburban areas. This may be a remnant of this redlining today, all to make more suburban residents move fast through our neighborhood at highway speeds. Many of these one-way streets have contributed to incredibly high monthly car insurance numbers for the residents that are forced to park on the street next to all of these speeding cars. Another phrase that comes to mind for Smoketown, Shelby Park, and Phoenix Hill residents is, quote, two-way in the white, one-way in the black, end quote, where multiple streets become two-way immediately after crossing neighborhood boundaries such as Preston Highway, Oak Street, River Road, Shelby Street, Breckenridge Street, and Kentucky. Oak Street also immediately reverses direction after crossing the 9th Street divide, even though Broadway and Oak are the only 2 roads that cross the entire city in an east-west direction before becoming two-way in the Highlands. Converting these roads will increase resident safety, reduce the amount of pedestrian collisions where our children play, and encourage new investment from people that do not want to be sideswiped by speeding commuters. The amount of tourism coming into our neighborhood through the bourbon industry, we also encourage funding transit options and neighborhood mobility hubs to reduce the amount of property damage caused by drunk tourists. Please realize that many of the people on this board do not have any one-way streets in the neighborhoods where their children play. Attached to the map of every cutoff road in Smoketown, Shelby Park, Phoenix Hill. All the best, Jody Dahmer with Beargrass Thunder. The second comment is, hi, within the Louisville community, there has been much talk about the long-term viability of circular street car/trolley lines in both Old Louisville and downtown. There also seems to be something enticing about the 2 light rails connecting major hubs for Louisvillians. Sanford in the south to Jeffersonville in the north, New Albany in the west to St. Matthews, Middletown in the east. Seems like it would be inline growing tourism, better access for those flying in between hotspots, and also for residents accessing major hubs for jobs, shopping, and nightlife. Thanks, Evan Kerr. Those are the 2 comments that we received. I don't see any in the chat. And like I said, nobody else is here from the public in the room, so I think that concludes the public comment period.
All right, follow up and ask Andy here, do we have any, particularly the first email there, any follow-up to that or study that, take a look at that?
We'll pass that along to the interested parties in the room, and then we'll see about getting back, see what we get back.
All right. We all know that many people feel they make suggestions and that they just, go over the edge after we're finished and, nothing ever happens. But that seems like if that is something, at least, should look at. The one about the trolleys, I know it's a good idea, but it's certainly a lot longer range. Right, thank you. Item number 4 here is, number 5.
Number 4.
We got 4 or 5?
Yep, public 4, my report.
Okay, your report, okay, go ahead.
All right, go through the numbers real quick and, some of the other stuff from the public outreach from last month. Good news is, again, we saw a, increase in our, transportation main page for visits. Also saw good steady numbers again from our TIP and our MTP page as well. Across social media, Twitter, this month did really well. We had over 4,000 impressions. and Facebook, and did continue to keep strong numbers, as well as we saw an increase on our Instagram posts as well. Good thing is with the Facebook posts, all our engagements are now over 100, except for like 2 posts last month. So that's really good news. That shows that we're keeping people's feed, and we're increasing that view in the feed. So that's a good thing. One of the other things is the Event Expo. We went to the Jefferson Business Expo last month. It was a good way to get out and just kind of talk to some of the people, well attended. Did things a little differently. Usually when I go to events, I'm trying to kind of feed out for public comments, just trying to get an idea of where issues are, concerns are. But this one I made a small survey, just 2 quick questions. Just what is your biggest commute concern, and where would you place spending priorities? So we had a dozen respondents to that. Just came through. They answered that on a laptop. As you can see, most of the people had issues with congestion, 66%, and where they would place their spending priorities is more into fixing our existing infrastructure versus more bike ped and highway expansion. The other thing I do want to mention, we are currently running a survey for our federal review next month. So if anybody wants to get online, I will send it out to TPC with a link. But if you all have anything like newsletters or anything like that you want to share that with, it'd be a great thing. We've already got over 60 responses. I'd like to see that get probably between 100 and 200 responses if we could possibly do that. Like I said, I'll send that out to TPC, a link following that. So if y'all can share that for them, feel free to take the survey as well.
Yeah, quick survey. It won't take much time at all. It's basically the public or the respondents' understanding of the transportation planning process in the region. Pretty simple, not too far, not too dissimilar from the poll we did at a recent TPC. Kind of, do you know where these things are? Do you know what an MPO kind of does? Some of those questions, and then a little bit more depth in that. But 5 minutes probably, I think. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
5 minutes.
It doesn't take anything at all. It's like 10 questions. It also asks you for priorities at the end of what issues you have with transportation as well. So, now the rest of my report, I'll take any questions if anybody's got any.
Questions? Not? All right, thank you, Greg. Item number 5 here is national electric vehicle infrastructure. We're about increased efforts for electric vehicle infrastructure from Justin Herod of KYTC and Robert Frazier from HDR. So,
Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to say thank you for having Rob and myself here. My name is Justin Herod. I am the planning lead for the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet for this EV endeavor. And with me today is Robert Frazier with HDR, as he is our consultant planning lead in helping the cabinet with this very fast timeline that we have to get stuff to federal highways by August 1st. So with that, I will share my screen. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Got it, thank you.
Okay. So one of the things that Kentucky's been working on since about January is bringing on a consultant on board to help with the planning for EVs for Kentucky. One of the things that Kentucky has to do is formalize a EV implementation deployment plan that's due to federal highways no later than August 1st. So with today's agenda, I'll do a very quick sort of electric vehicle overview, and then we'll sort of get into our alternative fuel corridors, or AFCs, nominations that the cabinet gave to federal highways back on March 13th. And then we'll sort of switch to the sort of phasing and funding and other high priority EV corridors that we're kind of trying to nail down in the state, and then how we're using criteria to develop this EV infrastructure plan, and the schedule that we're under. So as people may or may not be aware, there's about 3 different types of electric vehicles. This endeavor that from the bill or IIJA focuses solely on the battery electric vehicles that you see highlighted in the orange square. And also with this endeavor from Federal Highways, they are focusing mainly on the level 3 chargers, which is also known as direct current fast charging or DCFC. And these are the chargers that people can pull up to and in about 20 to 30 minutes be able to charge their vehicle efficiently enough to be able to continue on their way. The main purpose of this endeavor is for Federal Highways is to get a national network from coast to coast and border to border, so people can sort of be able to travel outside their state instead of having to, stay inside their state. But also I sort of highlighted in a dashed box level 2s because there are other funding sources out there that are sort of focusing on level 2s, whereas the cabinet with NEVI has to focus on level 3s. But once we sort of can build out some corridors, we can then sort of switch to perhaps some level 2s in community charging. So I wanted to highlight that we're focusing on level 3s. But, in later years, because this is a 5-year program, we might be able to switch over to some level 2s. And so some of the barriers that Federal Highways is trying to take care of is the 3 that you see on your screen, which is the charging infrastructure, range anxiety, and recharging times. A lot of people don't want to buy electric vehicles if they know they can't really travel state to state because the infrastructure is not there. Or if they do want to travel, they don't want to be waiting 2-4 hours to be able to charge to get back onto the road. And so these are some of the main barriers to EV adoption that Federal Highways with this NEVI program is trying to counter. And so some of the barriers to EV infrastructure deployment is a little bit focused on utility infrastructure. And we'll sort of get more into this later on, but due to the power levels that are needed for these NEVI compliant charges, some of the utilities out there don't currently have infrastructure, all over the state because it requires a 3-phase power in order to operate these NEVI compliant chargers. And so that's something that the cabinet and the EEC cabinet has been able to work with utilities to try and see where we have these 3-phase power destinations and then where we don't have them. And another barrier is utility demand charges. And this is sort of one that a lot of utilities are sort of worried about in the near term, as a lot of electric vehicles are not, out there in huge supplies just yet. And so that's just something that, utilities are waiting to get some feedback on from the joint office and future guidance as to sort of how demand charges might come into play, so it doesn't cost the entity that's installing these charges a lot of money if they're only getting like 1 person to charge per month, as opposed to several people a day or a week being able to charge. And so that kind of just depends on that peak time and how much that entity would be charged. And then also a big component of this NEVI funding is wanting to make sure that we hit those rural underserved communities or Justice 40 communities to make sure that we fill those gaps and that we're not just focused on the interstate corridors. And since this is a 5-year process, making sure that, we kind of hit the whole state. So while we do have to focus a little bit on the national network, we also want to make sure that for Kentucky, we're also focusing on our intra-state travel as well. And then another one is sort of the planning and zoning, building codes, other regulations. This is new to a lot of people. And so one of the things that we wanted to try and make sure with talking with MPOs and ads and other entities is, start having these conversations now with, what it might take to get a implementation of a charger in your area in a specific location. And so when, funding is available, you're not tied up by trying to get, the planning and zoning side of it, because that stuff's sort of been taken care of or in the process of being taken care of to sort of limit the delay time for those. So these are just some of the main barriers that are trying to, we're trying to overcome from the federal level and the state level. And so as you see on your screen, sort of, battery electric vehicles have sort of been on the rise since about 2018. US sales are roughly about 3%, and Kentucky's lagging just a little bit at 1%. But due to all the announcements from the economic cabinet about all these battery plants coming to Kentucky, and kind of the car manufacturers that will be established in our state, with not just that are already here, but then will be in our state. We kind of expect that this will end up, catching up as a lot of the batteries and car manufacturers start building the EVs in our state. But I do want to point out that this won't be like an overnight process. And, we've heard from some utilities that, they're worried about the strain on the grid. And, it'll take about 20 years to turn over about 90% of the vehicle fleet. And, most of the charging will be taking place at home, about 80 to 85%. I think I've seen some studies up to 90% will be done at home. And so it's kind of just making sure that as people are traveling, or if they're going to their work, that they sort of have those level 2s if they're at work, or if they are traveling, kind of that DCFC charger. And I just wanted to sort of list this as well. Something that we are trying to work on with our Energy Environmental Cabinet, EEC, is the Volkswagen settlement funds. We're trying to coordinate to where we might be able to do this hand in hand. So when we get obligation for the NEVI funding, that we know that we have to focus on our AFC corridors first, that we might be able to use some of the Volkswagen funding to then sort of focus on more of the rural areas. And so we are able to hit sort of, both places at once, and people aren't necessarily having to wait to us to build out this network before getting off these corridors and more into those rural locations. And then those are just some of the other kind of funding sources and places or organizations that have been able to install some of the chargers and working with other states. And I will say that there is a discretionary grant program that is supposed to be coming out probably later this year, hopefully in the November timeframe. And that discretionary grant funding will be open to everybody. And so one of the things also, which is why we wanted people to sort of focus on their planning with their zoning and building codes and whatnot, is to have those conversations now, as I mentioned. So when this funding becomes available late this year, that you can sort of already be writing applications and stuff for these competitive grants. And this will be a total of about 2.5 billion coming, countrywide, and those will be split into 2 separate groups. So it'll be 1.25 in one group and 1.25 in another group. And so I just wanted to share that as well. As getting to the alternative fuel corridors, the USDOT in their guidance back on February 10th sort of prioritized EV charging corridors. There are other corridors available, CNG, hydrogen, and a few others. And I will say that along with EV charging corridors that we'll get to in a second, we worked with the EEC cabinet to also have some hydrogen corridors nominated, and those corridors were 64, 65, and 75. And so, and that was the first for the state to have hydrogen corridors nominated, as we've had past nominations of all the other alternative fuel corridors. And their main focus, as I've said before, was on interstates to help build that national highway network, but other highways were allowed. And that's sort of where KYTC, in collaboration with a lot of different state agencies, MPOs, ads, and having some stakeholder groups, kind of really wanted some feedback as to what is it that y'all would like to see versus trying to be strategic enough to where, we're able to spend some of the funding, or, spend the first maybe year or two on the interstates and some of the other nominations, and then sort of get to the other community charging based things. So Kentucky, like I said, Kentucky submitted our nominations back on May 13th. And NEVI requires us to build out the alternative fuel corridors first. And the build out means that they're NEVI compliant, which we'll get into in just a second. And that mainly just deals with station size and spacing. And so, as the previous screen mentioned, on alternative fuel corridors, we sort of have to focus about every 50 miles implementing one of these charging stations. And these charging stations cannot be further than 1 mile from that corridor. And this is sort of where the power comes into play for the utilities, is because you have to have at least 4 ports at 150 kilowatts per port for these DCFC chargers, for a total of 600 kilowatts per port. And so this is where we're trying to make sure that when we're coordinating with our utilities, being able to get sort of a map of Kentucky to show where these 3-phase power locations are. And one caveat to that is that it has to be open to the general public, so it cannot be proprietary. And so that sort of rules out Tesla, and I think a new entity, Rivian, is sort of also sort of getting into the charging capabilities as well, but they are also proprietary. And so these have to be open to the public about 24/7. And as we still wait sort of on future guidance as to kind of what does general public mean 24/7, as not every gas station or place that might have one of these DCFC chargers might be open 24/7. And so we're still waiting for future guidance a little bit as to what that might entail. And so the reason why KYTC was trying to be a little bit strategic on what we nominated was the cost factor on trying to do one of these chargers every 50 miles, as the price can range from about $800K to about 1.2 million. And I'll say that, 1.2 million is sort of like the high end. But, we still wanted to try and budget for supply chain issues. And as we all know, cost of goods and supply chains are sort of going up, and that there's considerable lead times. A lot of the conversations we've had with different utilities, some of their sub-transformers and stuff that they're waiting on are about a year out from now. And so as we sort of wait for future guidance on maybe the Buy America component that's also tied to these chargers, as trying to figure out what's that balance between what we're able to do and what kind of keeps us from being able to really charge forward given the supply chain issues currently. And one of the things we're also doing is investigating the flexibility, which is kind of based on need. And I'll sort of get into that here with, like, as you'll see, we sort of looked at long distance trips in Kentucky. And as you can know, the interstates kind of pop at you, followed by a few of the parkways. And so part of the flexibility that we're trying to get from federal highways is, while we know that they really want us to focus on these interstate corridors, being able to also focus on these parkways within our state, and some of these 3-digit interstates in our state. And sort of kind of relaying to federal highways that, yes, there's obviously some corridors, as you can see on your screen, like 65, 71, 75, 24, and mostly 64. They really pop out at you, and even the Bluegrass and Western Parkway. And so, while some of these, corridors, will really benefit from these every 50-mile 4-port chargers, maybe perhaps not every parkway has to be, necessarily NEVI compliant, and could benefit from having like 2 ports per station and whatnot. And so, that's sort of the flexibility that we're investigating and to trying to see, and working with the Joint Office and Federal Highways as to, what that flexibility might look like if we have data-driven analysis to help prove that. And so with that on your screen, you will see in the green corridors are corridors that were nominated in the past 1 through 5 nomination processes for EV vehicles or EV corridors in the state. So that had 65, 75, 71, and 275. And then you'll see in the blue, kind of highlighted by teal color, these were the corridors that we have currently nominated. So basically, we just nominated the rest of the interstates, our parkways, and 3-digit interstates in the state. And the main reason why we decided to go this way is to make sure that we were providing enough of that interstate travel to not only focus on the national network, on those more heavily traveled routes, but making sure that we're also meeting the needs for the Commonwealth citizens as well. And so this was sort of some of the criteria that was used in selecting our key EV corridors. And like I said, interstates sort of were prioritized, looking at long distance travel, and then trying to connect to the national network while also filling in gaps within our state. And now I will turn it over to Rob Frazier to sort of speak to sort of the phasing and funding and getting a little bit deeper into our plan.
Thank you, Justin. And just to confirm, you can hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, so this map kind of builds on the map that that Justin showed before, and it's got the interstates and the parkways in the purple and the blue, and then some orange. And in the last slide, it talked about kind of connectivity and building that network. And there were a few places where we didn't have complete connections. And so there's this sense that there are other priority corridors that are going to need to be identified. And these were some initial ones. And this will change over time. But we want to continue to build a complete system to achieve the goals, both of the program, and then we have goals set out for the state. As Justin said, we want to make sure that folks can get where they want to within the state. And we have a large state. We have a long state, and so you need to be able to make it to all the different places. And so we want enough coverage to do that. And I am going to just pause and say that I saw a couple questions in the chat, and we will definitely hit on those here in a moment. So go ahead and go to the next slide, which shows the funding by year. So we get, if you look at the far right, kind of the smaller print, $69.5 million coming from the federal government. It's going to require 17.4 in non-federal match money, total of 86.9 million to be spent on electric vehicle charging infrastructure over a 5-year period. And the plan, as it stands right now, is to achieve, is to work to achieve the goals of the federal program, which is building, as Justin said, NEVI compliant chargers, kind of these high-level, high-power chargers on interstates and parkways, so that people can make long-distance trips without that range anxiety. So I know I can get home if I go to this place. I know I'll be able to get back. And so it's going to take us it's going to take us into year 3 to accomplish that, to get that part of our system built out. And then the funds can shift. So when we get permission from USDOT, we have to kind of get a certification that, yes, we've met their standards. Then we can shift and begin to spend the money on other highways or on community charging and destination charging, other things, which I'll touch on a little bit because it's really not the same thing. It's a different kind of charger that you'd install in those places. But this is generally how it's laying out right now over time. It is a 5-year program. So it's going to take a while to kind of work our way through the program. And that's the amount of money that we're looking at over the 5 years. And I will say the plan is going to be updated. The plan that we're preparing, and I'll talk about here on the next slide. So go ahead and flip to the next slide. We're preparing a plan, and that plan is going to be updated annually. And so some of this will undoubtedly change over time. But this is where we are right now, going in with the first draft of this plan. And the plan is required. Federal government is requiring everyone to have a plan to be able to secure the federal dollars. And a couple of key things about the program: it's an 80-20 federal, non-federal split of the funding, and private entities can be involved. So there's an expectation that these will be privately owned charging stations. The state does not want to own or operate these. There will be requirements related to reporting and them working properly and meeting all kinds of federal and state requirements, but the state does not want to own and operate them. So private entities would be involved. And then there are 5 things listed there. I'm going to go through those. Let's go on to the next slide, that we are looking at with regards to where these should go. Where should the initial money be spent? And so we are looking at interchanges. Again, we're looking at interstates and parkways. So we're looking at interchange areas across the state, and we're evaluating them to see which ones are suitable. They have power, they have all the things we need to put a station, and then which ones are our priorities? Where do we need them the most? Where will this program funding be needed the most? And then where might the private sector do things without federal funding? All right, so we're evaluating interchange areas. We're not looking at specific sites, just to be clear. Next slide gets into the first of kind of a group of criteria, and that's what kind of coverage do we have? If we put a station in a specific spot, what kind of coverage do we have, and how close are we to other stations? The next criteria we're looking at is, go ahead to the next slide. There's traffic volumes, and Justin talked about that. Where do we have long distance travel? So 150-mile or more long distance travel, and then we're also looking at the crossroads, so streets that intersect an interstate. How much traffic is there? So we're looking at traffic information. And the third criteria is power availability, reliability. And so Justin talked about 3-phase power. That's the ability to deliver large amounts of power. We're looking at about 600 kilowatts to 1 megawatt of power needing to be available at these sites. And there's only certain places where that's available and where we can have it be reliable. We have the substations in the area to make sure it's reliable. There's some places that it isn't there, and it would cost a lot of money to get that power there. Then criteria number 4 is amenities and services. Folks, need to be able to, if they're stopping for a long distance, they're on a long distance trip and they want to stop and they want to buy some food, use a restroom. We need to make sure that these charging stations are in places where folks can do those things. And so that's a criteria. And this is all tied straight to the federal guidance. The 5th one is rural and underserved communities. So making sure that we fill those gaps and that we aren't investing all in areas where the market will also be investing, but we are making sure we have a complete system and that the needs of everyone across the state are being met. So those are kind of the 5 general areas that we're looking at. There's a lot of specifics underneath all that. And then the next slide gets into the schedule for the plan. We just had a large stakeholder meeting on the 18th. We're having a lot more events like this. So this is in the way we've got a small group stakeholder meeting, and then we're going to have another large group stakeholder meeting in June. The final plan, the draft final plan, will be circulating within the state in June to the end of June, and it goes to USDOT according to their guidance. They need to see it before August 1st, and so it's expected to be submitted in July once everything is final. So that's kind of the schedule. And the next slide just gives you a place to sign up or send emails And we can take the questions now. Andy, if that's what, I guess I'd turn it back to you if you.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I think you probably answered much of the questions that are out there.
There were
Somebody
two.
asked if stations be part of a transit hub set up at major intersections of parking lots in urban areas, talking about amenities, and you kind of, I think you hit on that just a moment ago. That was in the Q&A, and then also in the chat, they asked, do EV quarters include state highways in existing urban neighborhoods? How does this affect pedestrian crossings around this new influx of traffic?
Yeah, and right now, so just I want to make sure that we're clear on that these charging stations are really for that, they're where you go if you need to get a charge in 20 minutes, and the technology is getting better and better. And so ultimately, they're shooting for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, like when we fill a gas tank. That's what the folks are trying to get to. And so ultimately this will be similar to a gas station, but you won't need as many of them because, as Justin said, 80 to 90% of charging will happen at home and at work. And so it will be a very different kind of a dynamic. But what will happen in neighborhoods is more level 2 charging, which is slower, and it might take 6 to 8 hours to get a charge for your vehicle, because you do it overnight, or you do it while you're at work or while you're shopping. And so there's different types of charging, and so I wouldn't expect a big impact from anything here on neighborhoods and pedestrian crossings and things of that nature. Although we do need to make sure that the design of these sites is safe and appropriate, as we do with other projects.
Thank you, Justin. I'll mention for the Hoosiers in the room and for the Hoosiers on the Zoom call, Indiana has the same thing going on. They're working on the Indiana EV infrastructure deployment plan. They've got a meeting June 14th at the Seymour District Office. Kip the staff will be there, so we don't know as much about the Indiana side quite yet, but we'll know more, at least as a staff, on after June 14th. And if you as an Indiana TPC member want more information, please just reach out to us. We'll let you know what we know, and maybe you can join us there. But I think they're along the same. Excuse me. They're doing the same thing. I think that their numbers are around 100 million. Kentucky's 80. What was it? 86.9 or something like that. So same thing going on in both states. All states have till, I think you all said August for the plan. That means
August 1st. Yep.
Yep.
Everybody's under the same gun. So appreciate it, guys. Oh, we have a question.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Is there any planning going on about replacing the road fund money? All these EVs are gonna not be paying?
Tremendous question. For the time being, at least, they are, they're
While we're doing
essentially
all this
freeloaders on
planning,
the system in a way.
would this be the time to come up with a plan?
I think it would. I think that's a Frankfurt question for
That's
certain.
Right, but it's,
Hey, Bernie,
you know,
that
the group should
was
take that
part
to
of
Frankfurt.
the discussion in Frankfurt this year, and I think one of the holdups when they were trying to increase the gas tax is that was the question that was thrown out there. And I think, not that that's what killed that, I think there was other things, but that was part of it, is how do we replace this? How do you charge? I mean, nobody's even talking about what it costs to do this. When you go to charge, I don't think we're at that point yet. When you pull into a station to do that, what's it going to cost to charge your car, and then how much of that would go to the road fund? And as far as I know, nobody in Frankfurt could come up with it.
Well, even at home, when you're charging at home, there needs to be some kind of plan with all this EV planning.
Yeah.
Now's the time to start.
And Mayor, you probably know more about that than.
The road fund bill had $150 in it to license, to pay for road fund money. They were gonna put the $150 in another bill. I'm not sure if it passed. It did not go to the road fund money, to do this. The road fund bill was pushed by Sal, who lost his primary. So we're not really sure what the road fund's gonna look like going forward. But then leadership, to your point, was ones that said, we looking at electric, and we said, I told him exactly, we need roads paved now, but we look at road miles, then when you go renew your car, how many miles you drove. The problem is with the gas tax right now, both people in-state and out-of-state pay it. When you do road miles on renewal, it's only in-state people. We haven't, to your point, we haven't come up with the total solution of but we're gonna have to do it quick.
I think we're roughly 50 cents a gallon or so in fuel taxes, state and federal, roughly. So that 150 is only 300 gallons of gasoline that a person can put in their vehicle.
So that would be statewide.
Yeah, right.
Statewide, more 26.
Yeah, but then the federal tax that adds on to that gets about 50 cents. And so, yeah, so the 150 is probably the state. So, yeah, we're you know, 150 enough? Does 150 replace what's being received by the 20 some odd cents a mile?
I think that was the problem.
Hard to say.
No, and it's also paid in state.
Yeah.
Getting out of state people paying it, but if you have these road miles, these equipment on the interstates and people to pay a tax on top of charging, which they will, then we'll start getting. To answer your question, Henderson actually looked at the electric company. They said a charge will probably run around $10 an average, right?
250 miles roughly.
Well, and the charge isn't just necessarily for the electric used equipment and everything else.
Well, what I'm saying, a charge station is about 250 miles down the road.
That's what they said.
Yeah,
you can.
Yeah.
So it's about $10 for 250 miles of travel, roughly.
Yeah, I think it's right.
And that's a quick charge, and they need to get it to where what he was talking about, is a 5-minute charge. Thought process, the next gas stations on the short term will be restaurants. Go in and charge their car while they're going into the restaurant, so they'll get it.
One of the things we've asked also at one of these meetings is could rest areas be a place for this? And federal government will not allow them to be at rest areas. They can't. Rest areas. So even though they are nicely spaced, 50 miles of gas, they're on the networks, but at least for the time being, those are not viable options for them.
So they probably don't have three-phase.
And the power supply issues too.
Well, three-phase power with the capacity of the tunnel, that's a big deal. Out there,
Not everywhere.
it's not a 110 plug-in. So what about Kipton? Will you create another division, you think, because of this, or create more experts, or hire experts to administer these grants coming along?
There are some opportunities for grants for local governments to pursue some of these projects. Those would be more of the what it would be more along the line of their second phase. Remember how he had his bar graph out there, the years 2, 3, 4, and 5, or 3, 4, and 5. I think we're along the same lines here. Once we get these out-of-state travelers and get those long-distance trips accommodated, the internal trips, a lot of those chargers presumably will be at the house. They can charge if you can get 300 miles at your house charger by charging it overnight. You're good for a day's worth of travel. But yeah, we'll be looking into that.
Something that they haven't mentioned, chargers, is a house that my house I can put a charger on it. But if you have a house that's an older house that only has a small 100-amp panel on it, you don't have enough breakers to put.
You see how to charge your car, right?
Just simply street parking versus garage parking. It's a lot easier to set it up in your garage than it might be
If you go down the
street.
downtown, yeah. So there's a lot of variables that have come in that they haven't really talked about yet.
Indiana, I think in 2017, had a $150 extra fee for EVs and $1 extra charge for hybrids. So
They're saying Kentucky, 1% of those cars are electric, if I call it charging. What's expected in the next 5 years? 1/10 to 1%?
It's, okay, so Rob or Justin, chime in. I believe what is the current market year? That's the 2021 year, I believe it was 1% EV, or battery electric vehicles.
Okay.
But the entirety of the whole fleet that's driving out on the road right now is only a tiny fraction of 1%.
We're at 0.1% of the whole fleet right now. There's around 4,000 electric vehicles in the state right now, out of 3.3 million vehicles, light duty vehicles.
What do you anticipate in 5 years? Any numbers?
I could pull it up. We anticipate things to go up fairly quickly on the sales side, but as Justin pointed out, it takes so long for a fleet to turn over that we don't anticipate the ownership percentage to change a lot. So, in 2030, we are still in the 5% range of all vehicles. So 5 out of 100, 1 out of 20 in 2030. It just takes a while because it just takes a while. I mean, even if your sales ramp up very quickly, it takes a while for the registered vehicle fleet to change because there's 3.3 million of them out there. So it'll be a process.
Fund tax. It's gonna be-
All right, well, thank you very much, Justin and Rob. We appreciate the insight. I think we've all learned quite a bit here today, and appreciate your presence with us.
Thank you.
Good luck between now and August 1st.
August 1st.
All right, number 6 here on our agenda is a staff is going to announce the funding awards and amounts for the fiscal 23 Metropolitan Planning Funds. And I guess, Elizabeth.
It is. Good afternoon. I'm here to present the recommended funding awards for the fiscal year 2023 planning funds that we can use to fund planning studies in our region. As a reminder, this is additional money that came to us from the bill, the bipartisan infrastructure law. It's about $225,000 that we identified that could be available for planning studies. We held a call for studies back in April, and we received 3 applications. So the 3, we have the Clarksville, Indiana thoroughfare study from the town of Clarksville, looking to study the existing and future transportation needs in that area, especially with all the redevelopment that they're planning in downtown Clarksville and Origin Park. Kentucky 329 bypass access management study, phase 1 data collection from Oldham County. This phase 1 money is anticipated to help bolster work on the 329 bypass study and fund that phase so they can get traffic volumes and estimates for that study. And then the third one is from Louisville Metro Government. It's the Louisville Jefferson County Intelligent Transportation System Implementation Plan. This is looking at a 10-year approach for implementing ITS infrastructure across the county in Louisville. There's more, the descriptions are also in your meeting packet on agenda item 6 if you want to read them in more detail. So these are the federal awards that we are recommending. The total project cost is there in the 4th or 5th column. Everyone overmatched. You can see that Louisville Metro Government's matching at 50%, and the other 2 are matching at 29.45% to hit us perfectly at that $225,000 availability for the funds.
Just to be clear, the Louisville Metro committed to the 50-50 match, while the other 2 applicants initially put in for an 80-20 split, the minimum split, but to able to make sure we can make these 3 projects happen, we said, hey, can you put a little bit more skin in the game and then get that oddball percentage there?
So it really worked out perfectly with the funding that we had available and just a small boost in local match to fit that $225,000. So the action requested today is to award these 3 studies in the federal amounts listed in the table.
All right, is there a motion to, are there any questions first? Motion to accept this recommendation.
Second.
Question now. All right, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Or raise your hand. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item number 7, the Metropolitan Planning Organization Dedicated Funding Program. And, let's see, Nicholas.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
I'm here today to request action on a cost increase that came in from Oldham County, for the Buckner Connector project. That project has gone out to bid for construction, on that roadway, and, like all, bids that are coming in right now, is extremely over budget. They need approximately, they need $1.1 million more, from the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, one of our MPO dedicated programs, in order to accept that bid. And so we are trying to expedite this to help them move forward and be able to stay within that, timeframe of being able to accept that bid. I can answer any questions about this. We do have enough funding in the general fund through the STBG program to fund this, and so there's no issues there.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve and second, any discussion? All right, appreciate that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I'll wait for that.
We need this. All right, item number 8 here, Metropolitan Transportation Plan Improvement Program Project Development, and this is
All right, I would like to provide the committee with an update on when we anticipate project development to begin for the next MTP and TIP updates, and a little bit about that process and what it will look like. And just a reminder of what is project development. So for the MTP, which our plan is going to cover the years of 2023 through 2050, we need a slate of projects that go out to 2050 that address the transportation needs that we're analyzing, forecasting, in that plan. And then for the TIP, it'll be any project with identified funding in the fiscal years of 2023 through 2026. Why? Federal regulation, I listed it right there. But we need to have those long-range and short-range projects and strategies for the development of our system. Okay, so the process is going to be a little bit different this time than it was last time. We would like to ease the administrative burden on sponsors and streamline the process for them, and for staff too. I think this helps alleviate some staff work. So for any existing MTP project, we will be sending out lists to all of our sponsors of their projects, and we ask that you all review those. Review the description, make sure that's still accurate, but most importantly, review the cost and open to public dates. Because I've received for almost all MTP projects, except for those that are currently funded in the TIP, would probably need their cost and open to public dates changed. We will also ask in those lists that you review any projects that you might want to remove that are no longer a priority, and we can kind of streamline our plan, make it less of a laundry list, a little bit more strategic, remove projects that way. For the TIP, you can...
Yeah, for the TIP, we'll be going through and sending you lists of all the current TIP projects and determining whether anything needs to change. And similar to MTP projects, if there are significant changes, asking you to make those through the project application form. But otherwise, we're going to handle that on the staff side and not make you go through the process of resubmitting.
So if your MTP project or TIP project, if the scope is changing significantly, if the purpose or need, we will ask you to fill out that form, but not every single project needs to go through that form like last time. But for that reason, we might need to follow up with your staff or you all with performance questions, because our evaluation is changing. We're looking at some new performance measures. If we don't have that information in the description, we might need to. So it'll be a very collaborative, coordinated effort, so just please be aware of that. And then for new projects, for the MTP, this could be any project on a functionally classified roadway as collector and above that is anticipated to use federal funds. But no federal funding has to be identified for those projects. They can be something out in 2050 that you're anticipating planning for your area. It could be something a little bit nearer term in 2030, but again, funding does not have to be identified. I would like to note that we do need projects for those outer years, the 2040, even 2035 to 2050. So please look at that in your plans and your comprehensive plans. If you have any projects in that time frame, we do need projects in those outer years. And think about the projects that you might be pursuing discretionary grants for. Go ahead and get them into the MTP to show that there is planning involved as you're applying for those grants. And a final reminder that this is all nodes. This is bike and pedestrian projects, large-scale active transportation, transit, freight, and roadway, all those nodes.
Yeah, so the TIP, obviously, any new projects that have federal funds awarded to them have to be in the TIP if their funds are between the years of 2023 and 2026. Additionally, candidate projects for the MPO dedicated funds, which I'm going to talk about the next call for projects and the next agenda item. We will always also want those submitted so that staff can review those and get a working group to determine a funding recommendation that will be presented to you. Yeah, any new, we'll be working with KYTC with the new six-year highway plan that just came out, and making sure that all the funding and that's contained in that document is reflected in our document.
I have one question about the naming of the funding. You're saying that a project does not necessarily have to have the federal funding source. Does that jive with the fiscally constrained plan, or is that?
So the MTP doesn't necessarily have to be truly fiscally constrained in that regard.
Okay.
It does. The MTP is likely available resource.
Yes, so we look at, expected revenue that we're planning on getting out to 2050, and as long as the project cost fits that, then it works.
Is that a change? Okay.
Something, I wouldn't put a project in that eligible for federal funding, but,
okay.
yeah.
We couldn't have $2 trillion worth of projects in our MTP, to be clear, but we can, if it's reasonably expected that that amount of dollars, inflation adjusted, would.
We will, again, be using a project application form for those new projects as well, so we can collect that information. This will be a new form, and we'll host workshops and trainings to prevent any hiccups with getting that information to us.
That form, though, we are making a concerted effort to streamline that, to use ArcGIS software, so that a lot of that's automated. So we think that the burden, again, on sponsors submitting applications will be drastically reduced.
Okay, for the schedule, again, we're aiming for that April 2023 MTP and TIP adoption. So we anticipate project development to open on August 8th and close on October 31st. Plan on hosting workshops in late July, again, for that training for the form, along with any questions that you all have regarding our data when you're formulating projects in your areas. I'm happy to go over that data with you as well. And in late July, kind of backing up to the beginning, we'll start sending out those lists and coordinating with sponsors. Some sponsors have 5 projects in our MTP, and some have well over 100 or close to 200. So, but we will coordinate with everyone, make sure has the information that they need. Do I have any questions on the schedule or process?
It's done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Nick, are you gonna go on with item number 9 here?
I am back, that's right. Yes, Chair, thank you. I've got a presentation, a brief presentation about this. So we are formally announcing the 2022 MPO dedicated call for projects. We've been asking about this for quite a while. Our last call for projects was in 2020, and that was for Kentucky sponsors only. The last one for Indiana was in 2018, and we made 4 years available of funding at that time, which is why we haven't had one in a little while. Here we go. So this new call for projects is obviously to award funds from the MPO dedicated programs for which this body has the responsibility and authority to award funds from and to sponsors. We receive funds on an annual basis that are sub-allocated from NDOT and KYTC from what they receive from USDOT, Federal Highways. The last call, like I mentioned, was in 2020. And our long-term plan right now is to continue holding these calls for projects every 4 years in Indiana and every 2 years in Kentucky. We are going to have a conversation about that with our Indiana project sponsors next month to confirm that that is something they still want to pursue. And the reason for that is really based on the amount of funding that we receive. We only get about $5 to $6 million annually in Indiana. That's really hard to do any long-term planning for a 4 to 5 or sometimes 6-year transportation project. We know how long these can take sometimes. So we are going to have that conversation, but our plan is to hold firm for now unless we hear otherwise from our sponsors. Quick little overview, and let me just say, this is just the Cliff Notes version. There will be an instructional document that has all the details laid out in it in terms of all the nuances to all these different federal programs. But to be eligible for these funds, you have to be located in the metropolitan planning area here in the Louisville, Jefferson County region, so in one of those 5 counties. Eligible sponsors include local, regional, state units of government. There's an exception now for the Transportation Alternatives Program, which is for bike and pedestrian infrastructure that now allows nonprofits to compete. So we will make sure to advertise that, although there are lots and lots of fine print to nonprofits being able to lead those projects. They must continue to provide that 20% local match or non-federal match, except in the case of the Highway Safety Improvement Program, where it is 10%. And the bipartisan infrastructure law did add one new program to the funds that TPC has the authority to award from, and that is the Carbon Reduction Program. And this program is very similar to the CMAQ program, the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program, except that all regions get them regardless of their air quality. So the project eligibility is very similar to the CMAQ program. Funds available. So this is based on, in Indiana, this is based on providing 4 years worth of funding, so going out through 2029. Congestion Mitigation Air Quality, let me just say, CMAQ program, it will be $6.3 million. In Kentucky, KYTC does not sub-allocate those funds for TPC to award. They handle that process on a statewide basis, so that's why you see that not applicable there. The Carbon Reduction Program, we are only receiving about a little over $600,000 in Indiana. We are just having some conversations with NDOT about that amount. And then in Kentucky, it's $16 million, and that is because we're going to get about $2.6 million annually in this program, Carbon Reduction Program. And the reason why that number is pretty high is because it's brand new, and we haven't awarded any funds from 2022 and future. So we have quite a bit to make available. Highway Safety Improvement Program, $3.1 million in Indiana, similar to the CMAQ program. KYTC manages that program at the statewide level and does not sub-allocate. Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, it'll be $9 million in Indiana and about $39 million in Kentucky. And then Transportation Alternatives Program, roughly $2.9 million in Indiana and $9.8 million in Kentucky, with those total funding being $22 million in Indiana, if we go with the 4-year approach, and $65 million in Kentucky. Just a quick kind of overview of the 4 programs. I don't know why the spacing on the screen has dropped off one of these. Either way, CMAQ, this program is generally about reducing emissions, right? So travel demand management strategies are eligible, transit improvements, bike and pedestrian facilities, advanced freight technology. But there is a list that's almost 2 pages long of CMAQ eligible projects. for which we will provide links to the federal documents concerning eligibility. Carbon Reduction Program, CRP, is all about reducing single occupancy vehicle use. So it goes to, it's basically CMAQ eligible projects are eligible, and transportation alternatives projects are eligible under that program. So bike, ped, transit, alt fuels are kind of the focus there. Highway Safety Improvement Program, all about reducing fatal and serious injuries, which we know are an issue here and everywhere else in America. And we are, there's a list of proven safety countermeasures that have project types associated with them that are just automatically eligible. And then for other projects that want to compete, there is some quantifiable analysis that needs to be done. Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, like most block grants, there's a wide range of eligibility here. The real restrictions are only for roadway projects that are not located on federally functionally classified roadways, collectors and above. But bridges that are not on those type of roads are eligible. Transportation or transit and bike ped projects that are not on those type of roadways are also eligible. And then it's cut off on the bottom, but Transportation Alternatives Program is, again, all about bike and pedestrian infrastructure and providing that, those amenities, improving them. That is the general eligibility. Again, we'll have lots of more information in the instructional packet about the specifics. The process is going to generally work like this. It's going to be start off with project sponsors around the same. We're going to operate on the same schedule and align that with the MTP and TIP project development. So this is all cohesive and it's not done separately. Hopefully it won't be disjointed at all. And so August 1st or August 8th, I can't remember the specific date, when the application process opens up, sponsors will be required to submit the new project application, or if that project is already in the MTP, then they just need to verify that existing information is still accurate. In addition to the project application, you will have to submit an MPO dedicated funding application. This is the same thing that we did 2 years ago. This is just specific to know your interest, and there's some additional questions that go along with asking for MPO dedicated funds. It's a brief application, so it won't be too much to handle. After those two things are submitted, staff will review those projects and conduct an evaluation using the TPC approved criteria. We've been working on updating that and streamlining that project evaluation criteria. Elizabeth's been leading those working group meetings, and I think that's going to be coming out to you all soon. A TTCC working group will be convened to evaluate the projects and develop a funding recommendation that will then be brought to TTCC for recommendation and for TPC final approval. KIPTA staff will then send a funding award letter about the next steps for that project sponsor to move forward and get going on the project. And schedule-wise, again, we're planning to have this workshop in conjunction with the TIP MTP project development workshop, so late July. Application window will run the same, August 8th to the 31st of October. Staff review through the end of December. Working group will convene, hopefully we can knock it out in one meeting, but sometimes they take a couple meetings. We'll do that in January, and then bring those recommendations to you all in February of 2023 with the award letters going out the following month. I believe that is all I have. Lot of funding available. Looking forward to seeing some great projects submitted. I can answer any questions or comments that you have at this time.
I just have a question. On the chart you showed with Kentucky and Indiana and the total dollars available, is it correct that like KYTC is going to run the CMAQ program the same way they have for Kentucky dollars, so the Indiana CMAQ, it would only be Indiana projects for CMAQ that would be part of this call for projects? That is absolutely true. So But TAP is coming to KIPTA?
TAP comes to KIPTA in Kentucky, as well as STBG and the new carbon reduction program. Those three will come directly to you all for award authority, and there'll be all 5 programs eligible in Indiana.
Okay, well, thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you, Nick.
You bet. Thank you, Sheriff.
All right, Greg is going to review the Indiana MPO contract.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, just wanted to let everybody know, I think we mentioned this before, but that we are, hosting the Indiana NPO conference October 4th through the 6th over in Jeffersonville. We are doing currently a call for sponsorship as well as presentations. So if you all have anything out there that you all are really proud of, you all want to, present to during the Indiana NPO conference, we have a direct link on our website, KIPTA.org. Go down to the bottom there, it's part of the slide deck, it's one of those slide decks. That will take you to our website, which, has the sponsorship, proposal list, as well as the presentation proposal list on there. So we're taking those right now, we're trying to, work that out, so we've got, great conferences will be in person, first time since 2019, so we're excited about that.
So far, we've got speakers lined up from Federal Highways, Administration, from NDOT, from some of the LPAs around the region. We got a couple other things in the works too, so we'd be happy, we've got plenty of room for you all to join us. Even if you're Kentucky, jurisdiction, please do join us. I think you'll find it informative and helpful.
Complete streets, that is the theme overall, so, definitely, if anybody has anything like that with, present, that's something we're looking forward to, but, obviously, anything that is, transportation related.
October 4th through 6th.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Administrative modifications, Nick, please.
It's a very brief, administrative modification. We have two projects. Both are existing projects. One is for NDOT, maintenance project over on Indiana 3. And the second one is the cost increase for Oldham County's Buckner Connector that you all approved, a few minutes back. No action is needed on this one, but I appreciate it, Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor.
These are just for informational purposes, but, thank you all.
All right, thank you. All right, number 12, any other items to discuss here?
I've got two quick ones if I can go, if that's okay. First, I want to thank, some of the folks in the room, some of the folks on the Zoom. As some of y'all know, we've made a roadshow the last couple of weeks to discuss our socioeconomic or demographic trends. Spencer got up and spoke to you a couple months ago about that, and so Spencer Williams and Valerie Moore and Zach and his GIS crew and Elizabeth and myself, we've been on the road, so to speak. I want to thank you all for participating in that process and the feedback. If you have any more feedback that you need to provide in that regard, please provide it ASAP, okay? Because we're going to be turning that around real quick. So any more feedback on that, please provide it as soon as you can. Secondly, next month's TPC meeting, June 23rd. That meeting will be the culmination of our upcoming federal certification review. This is the once every 4-year certification review of the planning process in this region. So it'll be a 2-day spectacular event, but the TPC meeting is when Federal Highways, Federal Transit, and EPA, our federal planning partners, will provide you all with their preliminary findings. It'll be the day and a half prior to that is when the meeting will occur. We'll have, Greg mentioned the survey earlier, and we'll have, there'll be a couple public listening sessions, as they're called, where the public can join us remotely or in person on the night of June 22nd to provide their feedback, similar feedback from what that survey would.
All right,
June 16th is a virtual one. June 22nd, which is day one of the day and a half event, will be a public/hybrid event at the South Central Library, the new library near the there by Jefferson Mall. Will be that evening.
Anyone else? Motion to adjourn.
So much.
Favor, please say aye.